In our last lesson, we took a look at how to create a scrolling background with a close-up shot, along with some emotions for our character. In scene 2 of our project, we can see this play out. We can just click along here and we can see that we have the effect that the camera is following our character as he runs. So that, he's not moving, but the background is moving, still giving off the illusion that, he's running. And so in this lesson, we're going to take that a step further by applying this method to this distance shot. So it won't be a close-up, and we'll be moving all the assets on this scene to give off the illusion of movement. So the first thing we need to do is copy this scene and put all the assets onto a new scene. Now, there's a number of different ways we could do this. First, we could copy every individual asset and paste it onto the new scene. We could copy the frames as well. We could drag the assets from the library onto the new scene and try to piece the scene together. Or we could simply duplicate this current scene, which is probably the easiest thing to do. So if you come over here to your scene panel, and if you don't have your scene panel, simply go to Window, Other Panels, and then Scene. Come over here to the Scene panel, and then click on Scene 1, and scroll all the way down now to the bottom of the panel, and you'll find a button called Duplicate Scene. Simply click that, and you'll now see that we have two Scene 1s. One of them is dictated by copy behind it. It's the same exact scene as Scene 1 because we just duplicated it. Now, grab it, click and hold, and just simply drag it below Scene 2. Now it'll appear after the close-up shot that we have. And finally, I advise that you rename it so that it makes sense, because Scene 1 copy is a bit sloppy as far as, the way it's named. So we can simply name it Scene 3. Or if you want, you could add more detail to your names. Like for instance, Scene 2, you can name Close-Up of Running Character, or whatever you want to do. Basically, as long as you're comfortable with the naming structure, that's what's important. So once we have that, we'll now move forward with creating a looping effect for our assets. The first thing I want to do is get rid of the animation I have for the boulder and the character. Since this is a duplicate of Scene 1, we still have these two objects going across the screen. So to eliminate this, I'll simply come over here to the character's keyframe on frame 55, click and drag that keyframe to frame 1. And I'll do the same now for the boulder. Click on its keyframe, click and drag and put it to frame 1. Now we have the assets on the right side here, and we can access them at any time, and we will be, as we will be putting them onto the scene once everything is moving around them. But for right now, we'll just leave them right there. The next step, and this is important, is I need to duplicate all of these symbols that I have on my scene here, because I'm going to be creating a scrolling effect for each of them. And if I were to just go in here into these symbols and create the scrolling effect as is, it would also alter Scene 1's assets, and we want those to remain still, and we don't want to alter those in any way. So, on Scene 3, let's right-click on the road symbol and select Duplicate Symbol. Now we can name this Road Animated and click OK. Now let's do the same for the other symbols so we don't forget and we don't change or alter anything later on. So right click on the trees, duplicate symbol, and then change this to Trees Animated. Just like that, and click OK. And then finally we'll do the same with the hills. Now one more thing I'll point out is we should also do the same thing here for the trees in scene 2, because again, these are also affected if we were to go back and change scene 1's trees. So given the fact that we have duplicated the symbols, we should be okay. But if you want to be safe, you could go in and duplicate this symbol as well. However, again, I'll leave it as is for now. Now finally too, one more thing I'll point out as we continue is when we play this scene, it goes really slow. And that's because mainly of the blur effect in the background. And so if you want this to play cleanly, we can simply come in here and eliminate that blur effect that I have put on to these background elements. We can add it later on, and we can tweak with the quality of the blur to see what speed will work best. It really depends on your computer and how much detail you have. But for right now, just for demonstration purposes, I am going to turn the blur off. So I'll simply click on the trees, come down here to my filters area, click on the blur effect, and then simply hit the trash can on the bottom of the properties inspector. And then I'll do that again for the hills. So going back here to frame 1, click on the hills, click on my blur effect, and hit the trash can. That way now we know that there's going to be no problem moving forward with the blur effect conflicting with the speed. And we can always add more later on. Alright, let's go back to scene 3 now. Now, we'll focus on the ground. In order to create a looping animation for this ground, we will need to basically copy the ground and paste a copy of it on the other side of this current ground piece. And then we will move the entire thing diagonally up, and we'll have the current piece match the first piece then in order to create a looping effect. So I'll just dive in here and show you exactly what I mean here, since none of that probably made much sense. So double click to go into the ground. Now the first thing I want to do is make this whole thing a symbol. So we'll be doing a symbol within a symbol again. So make sure all of your layers are unlocked and ready to go. I will simply highlight all the parts of the road, hit F8, and then I will name this Road Part 1, keep it as a graphic, and click OK. Now I can simply highlight this symbol and then copy it by going to Edit, Copy, or Control C, and then going on to a new layer, and then pasting. So edit, paste in center, or paste in place, or you can do Control V if you want. Then I will simply take this new piece and move it so that it matches the first piece in terms of where it connects. So we'll just go right about here and snap it into place. Now there might be, a line or something indicating that it's not quite where it needs to be. And if you need to, you can take your zoom in tool and make sure it's set to enlarge. And then come in and zoom in to see if there's any point where it looks like it might be ripping. And it doesn't look like it when I zoom in. It only looked like it when I zoomed out. However, it might just be indicating that there are two pieces there. We'll see how it goes once we do the animation. We might need to change it once we see how it actually looks when it's in movement. Once we have that finished, I'll take my selection tool here just so I can grab things. And I'm just going to scroll back over here to the first part of the road. Now what I want to do, as I was trying to describe before, is I want to move these parts so that this part matches this first frame's part. So come down here to your timeline and let's go to frame 30, And let's add a keyframe to both of these layers. So start at your top layer and click frame 30. Go to the bottom, hold in Shift, click, and then right click and insert a keyframe. Now we're going to move this entire thing over so that this part matches this part. So to do this, what I'll first do is zoom out to frame 75, just so I have a little bit more area to work with when I'm moving things around. And you can do this by simply selecting or typing in which percentage of the screen you want to see up here, or you can use the zoom tool if you prefer. But I'll type in frame 75, or percentage 75 I should say, to zoom out to that. And then with frame 30 still highlighted for both of these symbols, I'm simply going to start way back here, click and drag. Now you'll notice as I'm dragging there's a transparent preview of what previously this movement looked like. So since these parts are the same, what I want to do is find some common details here. And in this case, you'll notice that I'm moving this up to where my first blue streak on my first symbol is. And we can see that matching right here. So what I'll simply do is just try to move this up as best as I can and position it so that it matches. And release. Now if I click on frame 1, I can see that there seems to be no problem. Clicking back and forth between these two frames, it appears to be in the same exact spot. And that is what we want. We want this to do a looping animation, so we want it to be the same. Now finally, come back to frame 1 here on both layers. So click frame 1, hold in Shift, then click the bottom layer's frame 1, right click, create a classic tween. So now if we hit enter, we can see this moving, and we can see that it loops pretty well. And to get a better picture of this, let's go back out now to the scene just by clicking on the scene icon on the top of our Flash application. What we can do is go to Control, Test Scene. If we go to Test Movie, that'll test all 3 scenes that we have so far. Testing the scene will just test, of course, the current scene. So I'll just click that, and we can see that this looping effect is taking place. We can see that it seems to be looping, and basically it's going so fast too that you can't really tell that it's looping all that much, which is good. Now if we had a much slower moving animation, we'd probably want to set up more parts and more detail to indicate that. But since there's so much going on, we can get away with some things. In this case, we can get away with having one part repeat itself. Now, if you want, you could go in by double-clicking on going into your road, making a third section and placing it in between these 2 sections and maybe adding some different details to it, and then completing it, with the first section and then having it loop like we just did. That's all up to you. But for right now, I'll just leave it as is because I think it serves our purpose. There's going to be more going on, and we probably won't be able to tell all that much that there are basically 2 pieces of the same here looping. So let's back out now to our main scene, and let's focus now on the trees.